All right, folks, Baseball Island, here we are back again. I'm Tito, Jeff Fidoff. Follow him on the X at That Happens. Follow him, Chad Ochorinco, at Chad Ochorinco, Chad Rink on the right over there. Follow him on Twitter. That's where you can find him also. And then we are on Fantasy Sports powered by DSP Media. Download the free app for Apple and Android users, please. Listen, like, subscribe, love, share. What the one comedian always says, if you like us, tell your friends. If your friends don't like us, get new friends. But Chad, let's move on now. We've done the quarterbacks, the running backs, the wide receivers. So this one coming up is an interesting one because we'll talk. Let's dive right into it. Talk about tight ends. And there was obviously Brock Bowers set the world on fire last year as a tight end, and it seems like there's always there's certainly a tiered system, but the drop off is pretty significant once you get to that second tier. It feels like most years. Is that kind of the way you view it too?
Yeah, and I think of all the positions, this is probably the one with the quickest cliff. And I think it's one of the ones, them and QBs, I think you can kind of predict the easiest on how it's going to lay out. Like, Bowers and McBride, any rookies that come in could kind of surprise you. But there was that time where Kelsey, Andrews, were always going to be 1-2, and you just knew it. So I think the question is, is it really beneficial to grab one of the top three tight ends? Do you believe there's a sleeper tight end that can slide in the top five? And there usually is. There's usually one tight end a year that kind of comes out of nowhere to slide into that top five based on injury or just system or that kind of thing. So that's, I think, going in, more important than do I want to go hero RB, no RB, balanced, whatever. I think it's going to be where do I want to draft a tight end? Because we'll see if you want one of the top three tight ends in Bowers, McBride, Kittle, you are going to have to give up a top three pick for all three of those. So let's kind of dive into those guys first, because Bowers is going usually early to mid second.
Right.
McBride is going anywhere in the third. It's usually mid, but just depending what it is. And I think Kittle is more end of third, but it's early fourth, I think, at the latest. But I think when we did our mock draft, I think they both, Kittle and McBride, went in the third, and then no tight ends went in rounds 4 through 5. So I know you and I kind of both the same thing, but is there a world where you would take Bowers in the second?
I don't think so. I mean, I just think there's other positions I want to address before that. And look, last year, Chad, we saw with a guy like Jonnu Smith for Miami, and he was fantastic for the last half of that season. Now, I'm not saying he'll be that great again this year, but guys like that will pop up. And the Bowers one, I don't think anybody expected Bowers to do exactly what he did. I mean, he had a phenomenal rookie season. Trey McBride wasn't somebody I think that was. He's ranked a lot higher now than he was before last year. He certainly has had a charge there. So, I don't think I'd use a second round pick or a third round pick on a tight end yet. I would hold out, and you could get Evan Ingram in Denver, who's not too bad to have, or depending where you get Laporta in Detroit or Hawkinson in Minnesota. There's a couple of the guys you can look at. Jake Ferguson, even in Dallas, is somebody else. When you talk about the Dallas offense, I mean, Ferguson's not a bad option.
No. Yeah, I cannot see myself taking Bowers in the second. I just think there's too many better players. And so I am completely out on Bowers this year in a redraft. McBride is interesting to me, depending on how my first two rounds go, because I don't remember how many touchdowns McBride had, but he did not score, I don't think, until halfway through last year. So, and tight ends, I think a lot of times are touchdown. Like if you get a tight end that scores 12 touchdowns, he may not have that many yards, but it's huge. So McBride is one that I would maybe look at, especially if he's going more late third.
Yeah.
Kittle, I just don't know if they are ever going to use Kittle properly in San Francisco, because he's one of those guys, he'll go off for about 3 games for like 180 and 2 touchdowns. And then there'll be other games where they just completely just use him as a blocker. So I think I'm out on Kittle as well, because like you said, Hawkinson and Laporta are usually going like in the 5th round. And I think they can put up similar numbers to the other three, especially if Addison misses time in Minnesota. Hawkinson could be a pretty good steal if you get him in the fifth. So I'm usually out on tight ends in the first 3 rounds also, but I do think I prefer trying to get that next someone from that next tier than completely waiting forever and hoping somebody like Brenton Strange maybe comes up with 10 touchdowns.
There's and what I did last year through a few of the drafts I did, if I didn't take a big swing at a tight end, if I waited for a while, in fact, a lot of times you have clumped together. It might be like 4 or 5 tight ends. You're like, one of these guys is going to be fine. The other 4, I don't know. But, you try to they're pretty even with each other, and I'll try to get the stack going with the quarterback. So, for instance, if I've got a quarterback like say I've got God forbid Trevor Lawrence, though. I might look at someone like Brenton Strange, later on in the draft, just because then you figure every time he scores, it's going to come from your quarterback and that kind of thing. It's a bonus. It's a 10-point versus a 6-point or a 4-point touchdown type of thing. So, sometimes I will stack them that way. Kyle Pitts might have a big year this year for Atlanta. They of course they say it every year, but maybe he will have a big year. I don't know about that one. Dalton Kincaid in Buffalo, another guy there on a great offense. So I will say this: I think that the rookie tight ends are going to get overdrafted because people are going to remember what Brock Bowers did, and they think, oh, rookie tight ends can be really good. And I don't expect that out of Loveland or Tyler Warren. They're not going to put up Bowers type numbers. So I think that they're going to get overdrafted, though. I think people are going to take them earlier than they would normally because of what Bowers did last year.
Yeah, I think so too. I still think the Bears offense is still about a year away from being really good. They still have other talented players there where Bowers was really the only option. And so he got all the targets. And I think it's true because then McBride was the same way. He kind of came out as a rookie. Laporta did. So here recently, a lot of these rookie tight ends have come up and it put up big numbers. So yeah, I think I'm out on both. The Colts offense I think is just as bad as well. So I do like though if you pair your tight end with your quarterback for what you said, because if the tight end scores, then you're getting the 4 or 6 points from the quarterback. So I do also like that. And again, I also think you want to look at tight ends that might be on teams that can move the ball and don't really have that bruiser running back, or just like we talked in our previous episode, those wide receiver rooms that don't have that clear number one, like the Packers were like a craft where they at the goal line, that could be an option. They could get you 12, 14 touchdowns, even if they only get you 65 receptions. If they're getting 14 touchdowns, the next tight end has 9. That's a huge difference for your team that year. So, I think those are good things with the tight ends. And I said I would be leery on the rookie tight ends, especially those two, because I think those are the only two that are really going to get drafted with any kind of significant draft capital. Any of these other wide receivers like Fannin, Arroyo, you can almost get them for nothing. So I have no problem wasting a late pick on an upside tight end like that.
Do you, in most of your drafts, in a redraft league, are you drafting 2 tight ends?
I normally don't, even if I don't get it. If I get one of the top 5, then I'm not. If I have Hawkinson, I'm like, I will just ride him until he gets hurt, and then I'll figure out his bye week. Even if I get a guy like a Brenton Strange or Freiermuth, or somebody that just isn't, I would consider elite. Because then you got 2 guys that are just kind of mid tight ends, and then you've got the decision, which one do I start? And then if I only have one, I'm not gonna get mad if I start the wrong one because I only have one.
The only you start to be wrong if you started by.
Well, exactly. And then I would just rather stream. That's the thing. If you get one of these guys that are just like, if you're in a 12 team and you just go late, even if you get a guy like Ferguson and you kind of realize after 5 weeks, man, he's really not getting any kind of targets, then just go ahead and stream that. Or if you are, and one of the things I like to do too is if I wait on tight end, I try to get like maybe bulk up on wide receiver and have 5 wide receivers that are good and then trade for a tight end later on. So that's always a good strategy too. If you don't get one of the elites, just get a guy and then don't waste a roster spot on a backup tight end, a backup kicker, or a backup defense.
One of the things that I've seen some leagues do now, though, is it is not forcing you to start a tight end, where it's like a couple of wide receivers, then you can start one position, could be wide receiver or tight end, just because it's such a crapshoot sometimes for the tight ends, and with wide receivers, you can obviously find a lot more, number two, number three receivers that can produce consistently. Tight ends a little bit different than that, and I don't want to say there's luck based on the tight end, but it is very random sometimes. Like we just talked about, Bowers is number one, and McBride's number two, but we pretty much know the top 4 or 5 we think will be, but after that, any of them could be number 6.
Yeah, and I'm all for if you want to do a league like my Cincinnati one, we've never had it to where you had to have a tight end. It was just receiver tight end. I do like the wide receiver tight end flex spot instead of a tight end.
Yeah,
So yeah, I mean, I do like that. And again, yeah, it pretty much is a crapshoot outside the top guys. And I just was thinking about it. I think the only way I would draft Bowers or McBride, especially Bowers, is if you're in a 14 or more team league and you have to start a tight end,
yeah,
or if it's a tight end premium. They have these tight end premium leagues where like tight ends get extra points for whatever.
sure,
Then yeah, but if you're in a 14 team league and you have to start a tight end, then I think Bowers. If I'm at the 14, I think I take him at the turn because I don't think tight ends are going to come back to me, and that could be a huge advantage. If Bowers is averaging 17 points a game, and the next
right,
guy is averaging like 12,
yeah,
14, like if you got the advantage over like 8 to 9 other teams in that one spot where there's just one guy, that's a huge advantage. So that's one I think I have no problem if you want to go tight end early. But yeah, I'm like it's just one of those weird ones, and like Pitts again. You said Pitts is like he is so like the talent should be there.
yeah,
Have they not used him right? Like I think he's like what Pat Benatar talked about. He's a tough cookie with a long history of breaking little hearts like the one in me. Like that's who she was talking about was Kyle Pitts, and I've seen some
yeah.
great Pitts memes this year. Though I do think I will take a chance on him because where you can draft, like I don't think he's going as a top 10 drafted tight end.
No,
So if you give me like Kyle Pitts that I may get the 1 year he's going to be good and I have to give up a 14th round pick to get him,
right,
then maybe, you know, that may be one where if I would take a second tight end, even no matter who I had, and
right.
it's between like Kyle Pitts and you're looking at like, even a Ray Davis or somebody, then like maybe I take a chance on Kyle Pitts because if he emerges and I have 2 decent tight ends, that's huge. You can trade.
How about Kyle Pitts or Jonnu Smith? Which one do you like?
Um, that's a tough one because they got Fryermuth there,
Yeah,
and like I think maybe
they ran a lot of 3 tight end sets last night
they
too.
did. I think I would take Pitts based on the fact that I think Atlanta is going to score significantly more points, and
Yeah,
I don't really trust that they have a legit second wide receiver. So I think Pitts would be my guy. But Jonnu is interesting because I think what the Steelers may use is I think Fryermuth may end up being more as a blocker
yeah.
because Smith's not a very good blocker, but Smith is so good against linebackers. So I think Smith is the guy in Pittsburgh I would want. So I wouldn't mind taking Smith. It's just, do I want him over Pitts? Man, this light is killing me with my bald head. It's lazy. I'm usually sitting at the other end. It's not an issue, but my son was there. So
You look
I'm
very angelic.
I do with my Josh Dobbs
Yeah.
t-shirt.
But that's a great point you brought about the deeper leagues and maybe have to seek out a tight end sooner. That's true. Yeah, a 14 teamer, you may want to jump on that because you can find the wide receiver or running back you were going to take it down near the bottom of that or the top of the next round. You have a better chance of making up for committee with that because you've got multiple guys at positions you're going to start. You're going to start multiple running backs, multiple wide receivers. You're going to start multiple tight ends, and so yeah, if you're in a situation you have to play a tight end, you have to start an actual tight end, and you're in a 14 team league. I'm with you on that, Chad. I think I would also jump on one early.
And same quarterback too in that because I think those guys get drafted like quarterbacks. I think really get drafted up a round or 2 ahead than normally because you're in a 14, 16 team league
Yeah,
and you're the last guy to take a quarterback. You know, I, you know, no matter how good the rest of your team is, I think those are the 2 that I wouldn't mind getting earlier, because then if the quarterbacks are getting pushed up, tight ends are getting pushed up, what that means is the wide receivers and running backs that are kind of in that middle range are getting pushed down, and you can get them as well. So yeah, tight end, I think that's what you got to figure out what you want to do. And if you're in a redraft and it's not tight end premium and it's only a 10 to 12 league, I would pass in the top 3, but then try to get one of those next 5.
Yep, and like Chad's been doing, and like we're telling you, is do as many mock drafts as you can. There's lots of sites you can go to, put in your scoring method, and then do a mock draft and see what happens there. If you need help with your draft, Fantasy Draft Proxies, that's who Chad and I also do some work for. FantasyDraftProxies.com, and you can hire us to do your draft if you can't make it. You can also hire us consultants for the whole season if you want to. I think I ended up running about 10 teams last year for people, and I got a few signed up already for this year. But we'll do, Chad and I together, we'll do 100 drafts at least, hopefully this fall. So make sure you check him out. He is out at Chad Ochorinco. I'm at It Happens. Fantasy Sports, powered by DSP Media. Download the free app for Apple and Android users, and make sure you check us out. Next time, we'll do something with some dynasty advice and give you some ideas of where we rank certain dynasty players, and give you some advice on what you should be doing as far as your strategy goes for that. Chad, have a great night, bud.
All right, you too.
All right, talk to you soon, folks.
Yep.